The great hall of Varric Station shook under the weight of distant explosions. Smoke crawled through the cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of burning metal and fear. Alien soldiers rushed in every direction, their armor clashing and weapons humming. In the middle of the chaos, a young alien woman with crimson hair sat on the cold floor, her back against a fractured pillar. Her eyes were fixed on the massive shadow moving toward her from the far side of the corridor. Her name was Saraya, the last daughter of the Tevar royal line. Hours ago, she had been a symbol of hope for her people. Now she was nothing more than prey, trapped in a collapsing cage. She clutched the broken remains of her ceremonial shield, the edges splintered and scorched. The beast hunting her had already torn through dozens of trained warriors. None had lived long enough to warn the rest. The air grew heavier as the shadow took form. It was a creature from the old war legends, a hulking mass of muscle and black armor with claws that could rip through starship hulls. Its eyes glowed with a molten orange light, locked on her as if nothing else in the world existed. The sound of its claws scraping the metal floor echoed like the ticking of a clock counting down her life. Saraya tried to push herself up, but her leg burned with pain from a deep gash. Her breath came in short bursts. She had been trained to face enemies in combat, but not this. This was not a fight. This was a sentence. The beast stopped a few meters away, its growl low and rumbling, vibrating in her bones. She thought of her people. If she died here, the last claim to the throne would die with her. Yet there was no way forward. Her weapon was gone. Her body was weak. The beast crouched, ready to leap, and she closed her eyes for what she thought would be the final time. The sound of footsteps broke through the roar of her heartbeat. Not the heavy, dragging steps of the beast, but lighter, faster, purposeful. She opened her eyes to see a figure step into the space between her and the monster. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing armor unlike any she had seen before. It was human armor. The man inside didn't flinch as the beast snarled at him. For a moment, the beast hesitated, as if trying to understand why another challenger had appeared. The human slowly raised his left arm, holding a shield so battered, it looked like it had already seen 100 battles. Cracks ran through its surface, but his grip on it was steady. His right hand held a short blade that shimmered faintly under the dim light. "You'll have to go through me," the human said, his voice low and calm. Saraya didn't know the words, but she understood the meaning. He was not here to run. He was not here to beg. He was here to fight. The beast tilted its head, then let out a deafening roar that rattled the walls. The human didn't step back. Instead, he moved forward. Saraya's heart pounded. She had never seen a human before, only heard conflicting stories about them. Some said they were reckless savages. Others claimed they were fearless warriors who could turn hopeless battles into victories. She didn't know which was true, but at that moment, as the human stood between her and death, she wanted to believe the latter. The beast lunged, faster than she thought possible for its size. The human's shield met the attack with a crash, sparks flying as claws scraped against the cracked surface. He slid back a step but held his ground. The blade in his right hand darted forward, slashing across the beast's forearm. It roared again, more from surprise than pain. Saraya's breathing quickened. The fight was happening too fast for her to follow every movement. The human shifted, blocked another strike, then rolled aside as the beast's tail whipped through the air, smashing into the wall where he had been standing. Debris rained down, but he emerged from the dust still holding that broken shield like it was the only thing that mattered. The beast circled, growling, searching for a weakness. The human didn't chase it. He waited, feet steady, eyes sharp. Every muscle in his body was ready to move at the first sign of an attack. The air between them felt like it could snap at any second. Saraya, still pressed against the pillar, could barely believe what she was seeing. She had been ready to die. Now she found herself hoping again, even if it was just a fragile spark. Something about the way the human stood there, unshaken before, a nightmare that had ended so many lives, made her think this battle was not over yet. The beast lowered itself again, its muscles coiling like a spring. Its massive claws scraped long scars into the floor as it prepared to strike. The human adjusted his stance, keeping the broken shield high and the blade angled for a counter. Around them, the ruined hall felt smaller, as if the walls were closing. And to witness the fight, Soraya forced her body to move, dragging herself to a position where she could see both the man and the monster clearly. She wanted to help, but her injury and lack of weapons made her useless in this battle. The sound of her own shallow breathing mixed with the deep growls of the beast, and the faint hum of the human's armor. The beast attacked first, lunging with its claws aimed for the human's head. The shield took the blow, cracking further under the impact, but the man used the force to spin sideways, slicing his blade along the creature's ribs. Black blood hissed as it hit the ground, and the beast recoiled, snarling in rage. Soraya's eyes followed every movement. The human was not faster than the beast, but his timing was perfect. Every block, every step, every slash was placed with precision. It was like watching a dance between death and defiance. Yet she could see the strain in his movements. The broken shield shook with each hit, and sweat lined his jaw. The beast shifted its strategy, circling to the left, forcing the human to turn and keep it in sight. Its tail lashed out suddenly, striking the man across the side. He staggered, his armor absorbing part of the blow but leaving a dent. Soraya's fingers dug into the stone beside her as she saw the human recover his footing without hesitation. With a roar, the beast leaped again. This time the man dropped low, letting the claws swipe over him, and thrust his blade deep into the creature's side. The impact forced the beast to stumble, its massive frame crashing into a wall. Dust and fragments of metal rained from the ceiling as the hall groaned under the force. For a moment, there was silence except for the beast's heavy breathing. Its eyes narrowed and it stepped back from the human, clearly reassessing its opponent. Soraya realized this fight was far from over. The creature was testing him, learning his rhythm, waiting for the right moment to crush him. The man glanced back at her for the first time. His eyes, framed by the visor of his helmet, met hers. There was no fear in them, only determination. Without speaking, he signaled for her to stay where she was. She understood the meaning clearly. If she moved, she would distract him, and that would mean death for them both. The beast roared again, the sound shaking dust from the ceiling. It lunged faster than before, aiming low this time. The man blocked with the shield, but the force drove him back several steps. His boots scraped against the floor as he struggled to hold his ground. The shield's center split under the pressure, but he still refused to drop it. In a sudden twist, the beast's tail whipped around, slamming into the man's weapon hand. The blade clattered across the floor, sliding out of reach. Soraya's heart lurched as the monster towered over him, claws raised for the killing strike. Yet instead of stepping back, the man surged forward, using the remains of the shield to bash the beast's jaw upward. The move bought him a heartbeat, just enough to dive and grab his blade again. The beast's claws tore into the floor where he had been standing. Sparks shot into the air as metal met metal. The man rolled to his feet, swinging the blade in a sharp arc that caught the beast across the neck. It howled in fury, stumbling back a step. Soraya's hands trembled as she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. This human was not only surviving, he was pushing the beast back. Every story she had heard about humans seemed too small for what she was seeing now. They were not reckless. They were relentless. The beast's chest rose and fell faster. Its movements grew sharper, more desperate. It lunged again, claws flashing, but the man sidestepped and drove his blade deep into its shoulder. A gush of black blood sprayed the ground, and the beast staggered. The human pulled the blade free and prepared for another strike. Soraya felt her hope ignite into something stronger. For the first time since the attack began, she believed they might survive this. The human had stepped between her and the beast. Without hesitation, and now he was turning the tide of the battle. The beast reeled from the strike, its claws dragging deep grooves in the metal floor as it tried to steady itself. The human didn't give it a moment to recover. He pressed forward, slashing at its arm and forcing it to step back. The sound of steel against armored hide rang through the hall. Soraya could hardly believe her eyes. She had seen seasoned warriors fall to this creature in seconds, yet the human moved like he had been fighting monsters his entire life. Every step he took pushed the beast away from her, creating a growing space between her and death. The beast's roar filled the air, echoing through the cracked pillars. It lunged again, this time with both claws aiming to crush him. The human ducked under the swing and stabbed upward, piercing the joint where the shoulder met the torso. A spray of black blood splattered across his armor, but his eyes never left the target. Soraya tried to rise, wanting to reach for anything she could use as a weapon. Pain shot through her leg, forcing her back down. She bit back a cry, unwilling to distract the man who was risking everything to protect her. Her hands clenched into fists, her body trembling with frustration and fear. The beast roared in fury, spinning to swipe at him with its tail. The human leapt over it, landing behind the creature and driving his blade into its back. The sound was a mix of tearing flesh and grinding armor. The beast staggered forward, slamming into a wall with enough force to make the entire hall shudder. Dust and debris rained down. The dim lights flickered, casting shifting shadows over the combatants. The human pulled his blade free, keeping the broken shield up as the beast turned to face him again. It was breathing harder now, its movements less sharp, its eyes blazing. With rage, Soraya realized the fight was becoming a test of endurance. The human's breathing was heavy, and his stance showed signs of strain. Yet his resolve had not wavered. He was still there, standing between her and the nightmare that had come for her life. The beast lunged again, faster than she expected in its wounded state. The human met the attack head-on, shield raised to block the claws. The impact rang out like a bell, and he shoved the creature back with all his strength. Then, in one swift motion, he sliced across its chest, leaving a deep wound that oozed thick, dark blood. The smell of the beast's blood filled the air, sharp and metallic. It growled low, crouching as if preparing for one final charge. The human didn't move back. He adjusted his grip on the blade and took a slow breath, ready to meet the next assault. Every line of his body spoke of defiance. Soraya felt her heart pounding in her ears. She didn't understand why a human would risk himself for her. They had never met before. There was no alliance, no promise, no reason for him to step in when he could have walked away. And yet, he had chosen to stand here. The beast struck again, this time in a blur of claws and snapping jaws. The human moved like a shadow, blocking with the shield, ducking under the strikes, and countering with precise slashes. Sparks burst from the impact points, and the floor shook beneath their feet. Each movement was a gamble, but he didn't hesitate. The fight dragged on, both combatants slowing from exhaustion. The human's armor was dented, his shield nearly in pieces, and his blade coated in the beast's blood. The creature was bleeding from several wounds, its breathing ragged and uneven. It was clear that the battle could not last much longer. Soraya's fingers tightened around a shard of metal lying near her. She couldn't sit idle any longer. Her injury made her slow, but she could still fight. Her people had a saying, hope is strongest when shared. If she could distract the beast for even a moment, it might give the human the opening he needed. The beast roared, leaping for the human with all its remaining strength. The man braced himself, raising the shield high to block. At the same time, Saraya hurled the metal shard with all the force she could muster. It struck the beast's eye, making it howl in pain and jerk its head aside. The opening was brief, but the human seized it. He stepped in close, driving his blade deep into the tufa. Beast's throat. The roar cut off instantly, replaced by a wet gasp. The creature staggered back, its claws flailing weakly before it collapsed onto the floor with a heavy thud. Saraya stared at the unmoving form, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The hall was silent except for the sound of the human catching his breath. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable behind the visor, but his stance was no longer tense. The threat was over, at least for now. The silence after the battle felt heavier than the fight itself. The beast's body lay sprawled on the floor, its black blood pooling around it. The human stood still for a few moments, breathing hard but keeping his weapon ready in case it moved again. Saraya tried to stand, leaning against the broken pillar for support. Her leg throbbed with pain, but she forced herself upright. She didn't want to be seen lying on the ground like a helpless child. The human noticed her struggle and stepped forward without a word. Offering his arm for balance, she hesitated before accepting his help. His armor was warm from the fight, the metal scratched and dented. His grip was steady, and he moved carefully so as not to hurt her further. She realized he was taller than most of her people, his presence filling the space around them. "Who are you?" she asked softly. Her voice sounded weaker than she intended. The human paused, then simply said his name, a sound strange to her ears. It carried no title or rank, yet his actions spoke louder than any crown or medal could. They moved slowly toward the end of the hall. The air was still thick with dust, and faint tremors shook the ground. Somewhere deeper in the station, the fighting continued. Saraya glanced back at the beast's corpse, knowing it was only one of many threats roaming these corridors. As they turned a corner, the human stopped abruptly. His eyes scanned the shadows ahead, and his hand tightened on the hilt of his blade. Saraya followed his gaze and saw faint movement, a shimmer of metal in the dim light. Shapes emerged from the darkness, armored soldiers, but not from her people. Their armor was dark and sharp-edged, marked with the insignia of the Zer Dominion. Her heart sank. The Dominion was responsible for unleashing the beast, and they were here to finish what it had started. There were 5 of them, each holding plasma rifles ready to fire. The human stepped in front of her again, his shield lifted despite its broken state. One of the soldiers shouted something in their harsh language, but the man didn't move. His stance was calm, as if he had already chosen his next move. Saraya could feel the tension between the two sides, thick as the air before a storm. Soldiers spread out, trying to flank them. The human adjusted his position, keeping himself between Saraya and the enemy. She could see the calculation in his movements, the way he anticipated their steps before they took them. His eyes never left their weapons. The first shot came without warning. A bolt of plasma hissed through the air, striking the wall near them and sending shards of stone flying. The human pushed Saraya against the wall to shield her from the blast, then charged forward before the soldiers could fire again. He moved with speed that caught them off guard. The first soldier barely had time to react before the human's blade cut through his weapon arm. The soldier fell back with a cry, and the human spun to block incoming fire with his shield. The plasma bolts scorched its surface, but he kept advancing. Saraya wanted to help, but her injury kept her pinned in place. She searched the ground for anything she could throw or use to distract the soldiers. Her hand closed around a loose piece of metal pipe, heavy enough to be a weapon in desperate hands. The human cut down a second soldier, his blade striking with brutal precision. The remaining 3 hesitated, clearly unsettled by his ferocity. That hesitation cost them. The man lunged at the nearest one, kicking his legs out from under him and delivering a swift strike to the chest. A plasma shot whined past the human's head, narrowly missing. Saraya hurled the pipe at the shooter. It struck his helmet, making him stumble long enough for the human to close the distance. One slash across the chestplate ended the fight for him, leaving only one soldier still standing. The last soldier turned to run, but the human was faster. He caught him by the collar, yanked him back, and slammed him against the wall. The soldier dropped his weapon, raising his hands in surrender. The human's blade hovered near his throat, a silent demand for information. Saraya stepped closer. Despite the pain in her leg, she looked into the soldier's eyes and saw fear. The Dominion was not used to being hunted in their own raids. She knew they needed answers, and this man might have them. The human didn't speak, but the message was clear: start talking or face the end. The captured soldier's breathing was fast and uneven. His eyes darted between the human's blade and Saraya's expression. Sweat glistened under the dim light, and the tension in the air was sharp enough to cut. The human didn't speak. Letting silence press down like a weight, Saraya stepped forward, leaning slightly on the wall for support. She asked him where the Dominion forces were concentrated on the station. Her voice was calm, but each word carried the promise that his answer would decide his fate. The soldier hesitated, his jaw tightening. The human's blade pressed closer to the soldier's neck, not cutting but letting him feel how quickly that could change. The soldier swallowed hard and finally spoke in his own language. Saraya understood. Enough to catch the meaning. There were more beasts, and the Dominion planned to release them deeper into the station. Her stomach turned at the thought. One beast had nearly ended her life, and the human had barely survived that fight. If more were set loose, there would be no safe place for anyone left inside. She glanced at the man beside her, but he was already making his decision. Without a word, the human pushed the soldier towards Saraya. She struck him across the head with the flat side of the metal pipe she had found earlier, knocking him out cold. He slumped to the ground, and the human began moving toward the next corridor. Saraya followed as best she could. The path ahead was narrow, the walls scorched from recent fighting. Flickering lights cast long shadows, and the sound of distant alarms echoed through the metal passages. Every step felt like moving deeper into the heart of a storm. They reached a security door, its surface dented from previous impacts. The human examined the control panel, then pried it open with his blade. Wires sparked as he worked quickly to bypass the lock. Saraya watched his hands, noting how precise and steady they were despite the chaos around them. The door slid open with a heavy grind, revealing a chamber filled with equipment and dim blue lights. A holographic map glowed in the center, showing the station's layout. Several red markers blinked across it, each one representing a place where Dominion forces were gathered. Saraya moved closer to the map, tracing her finger toward the largest concentration of enemies. It was near the power core, deep within the station. If the beasts were released there, the destruction would spread through every section within minutes. She looked at the human, and he nodded without hesitation. They left the chamber, moving quickly through the connecting corridors. The human led the way, his movements silent and controlled. Saraya stayed close, relying on his pace to guide her through the maze of passages. The sound of their footsteps was the only constant against the distant noise of battle. A sudden metallic roar broke the silence. Both stopped instantly, listening. The sound came again, louder and closer. It wasn't the same beast as before. It was deeper, heavier, like something dragging its weight along the floor. Saraya's pulse quickened as shadows shifted ahead. From the darkness emerged a creature twice the size of the first beast. Its hide was dark silver, its claws long and curved like hooks. A deep scar ran across its face, and its eyes glowed faintly blue. The air around it seemed colder, each breath visible in the dim light. The human stepped forward, shield lifted, blade ready. Saraya backed up to the wall, her hands tightening around the pipe she still carried. She knew she could not stop this. creature, but she would not run. The human had stood between her and death before. She would stand her ground now. The beast let out a low growl, then charged with surprising speed. The human met it head-on, the sound of impact ringing like thunder in the corridor. Sparks flew as claws met metal, and the narrow space magnified. Every movement, every strike, Soraya saw the human push the beast back a step, but its strength was far greater than the last one. It swiped again, forcing him against the wall. He rolled aside at the last second, avoiding a claw that tore a deep gouge into the metal where he had stood. The fight raged in close quarters, each exchange faster and more dangerous, the human's. Shield was cracking again, but he refused to give up ground. Soraya's grip on the pipe tightened as she waited for any chance to strike and help him. The battle had only just begun. The narrow corridor amplified every sound of the fight. Each clash of claw against shield echoed like thunder, shaking dust from the ceiling. The human shifted his stance with quick, precise movements, always keeping himself between Soraya and the beast. The creature pressed forward, its glowing blue eyes fixed on him. Its massive claws tore deep scars into the floor with every step. The air smelled of burning metal where its strikes scraped the walls. Its growls vibrated in the bones, each one promising destruction. Soraya gripped the metal pipe so tightly her knuckles ached. She knew she could not overpower the beast, but she refused to stand idle. She scanned the corridor for anything that might give the human an advantage. Broken panels, exposed wires, anything that could be turned into a weapon. The beast struck. Again, forcing the human back. His shield caught the blow, but the impact sent him sliding several steps. He slammed his boot against the floor to stop his momentum and countered with a slash at the creature's leg. The blade bit into the hide, but the wound only seemed to enrage it further. A roar filled the corridor as the beast reared back on its hind legs. It lunged with terrifying speed, claws sweeping in a deadly arc. The human ducked low, rolling under the strike and driving his blade upward into its chest. The creature staggered but did not fall. Its thick armor-like skin had absorbed much of the blow. Soraya's gaze landed on a sparking cable hanging from the wall. She remembered the Dominion soldier's weapon had been powered by similar energy lines. If she could bring the beast into contact with it, the shock might weaken it. She moved along the wall, keeping low so as not to draw the creature's attention. The human held the beast's focus, stepping sideways and blocking each attack. Sparks burst from his shield as claws scraped against it. His movements were slower. Now his breathing heavier, but his eyes never left the creature. He was looking for an opening just as much as she was. Soraya reached the cable and yanked it free from the wall. The end hissed with energy, blue sparks leaping from it. The sound made the beast's ears twitch, but it did not turn away from the human. She stepped closer to the fight, waiting for the right moment to act. The beast swiped again, its claws knocking the human's shield from his grasp. The broken metal plates skidded across the floor. The human barely had time to duck under another strike, his blade flashing in the dim light as he aimed for the neck. The blow cut deep, and the beast roared in fury. Soraya charged forward, swinging the sparking cable toward the creature's side. The energy burst upon contact, and the beast let out a deafening scream. Its body jerked violently, blue light flashing across its armor-like skin. The smell of burnt hide filled the corridor. The human did not waste the chance. He drove his blade deep into the wound at the creature's neck, twisting it hard. The beast convulsed once, then collapsed to the ground. With a crash that shook the walls, the sound of its last breath was a low, fading rumble. Silence settled over the corridor. Soraya's chest rose and fell rapidly as she let the cable drop from her hand. The human pulled his blade free and glanced around, making sure no other threats were approaching. His armor was scorched, his blade stained dark, but he stood tall. She limped toward him, the adrenaline in her body still strong enough to dull the pain in her leg. "We need to reach the power core," she said. Her voice firm despite her exhaustion. He gave a short nod and retrieved his shield from the floor. Strapping it back onto his arm, they continued forward, moving through twisting corridors lit only by flickering panels. The air grew warmer the deeper they went, a sign they were nearing the station's main systems. Soraya could hear the distant hum of machinery, steady and deep like the heartbeat of the station. Finally, they reached a massive reinforced door marked with the insignia of the Dominion. The human inspected it, running his fingers along the locking mechanism. Soraya could see the faint glow of security fields guarding it. Breaking through would not be easy, and they both knew time was running short. The massive reinforced door loomed over them, its surface layered with Dominion markings and warning symbols. Soraya could hear the faint hum of power coursing through it, a reminder of the security field protecting what lay beyond. The human stepped closer, studying the locking mechanism with focused eyes. He set down his shield and drew a small tool from his belt. His hands moved with precision, prying open the outer panel to expose the wiring beneath. Sparks flickered as he worked, the air filling with the faint scent of burnt circuits. Soraya kept watch, her eyes scanning the dim corridor for movement. Every sound seemed sharper here, each distant clang or muffled voice amplified in the stillness. The Dominion would not leave the power core unguarded. She knew they could be surrounded at any moment. Her grip tightened on the metal pipe she still carried. Her injured leg braced against the wall. The human cut through a cluster of wires, and the glow from the security field flickered. A low warning tone echoed from the door, but he kept working, his focus unbroken. He rewired connections with speed, bypassing layers of encrypted locks until the hum of the field died completely. With a heavy groan, the massive door slid open, revealing the heart of the station. The power core chamber was vast, its center dominated by a towering column of energy encased in transparent shielding. The air inside was warmer, thick with the scent of heated metal and ozone. Along the walkways surrounding the core, Dominion soldiers moved in coordinated patterns. They were armed and alert, their armor glinting in the shifting light of the core's energy pulses. At the far end of the chamber, Soraya spotted something worse: 3 containment cages, each holding a beast larger than the ones they had fought. The sight made her blood run cold. If those cages were opened, the station would be lost. The human followed her gaze, his expression tightening as he calculated the distance and the risks. She knew what he was thinking. They would have to act fast. They slipped inside, moving along the upper walkway to stay out of immediate sight. The human led the way, crouched low with his shield strapped tightly to his arm. Soraya followed close behind, her steps silent despite the throbbing pain in her leg. The hum of the power core masked their movements. 2 soldiers blocked their path, their attention fixed on the lower levels. The human moved in without hesitation, striking the first in the back of the helmet with the edge of his shield. The second turned in surprise, but Soraya swung her pipe hard, knocking him into the railing before he could raise his weapon. They pushed forward, descending a narrow set of stairs toward the core's control platform. From here, Soraya could see the main terminal, a glowing console surrounded by armored guards. The human's eyes locked on it. If they could override the system, they could cut power to the beast cages before the Dominion could release them. The human signaled for her to wait while he moved ahead. He weaved through the shadows, closing the distance to the terminal with careful, deliberate steps. A guard turned, and in that instant, the human struck, driving his blade between the plates of his armor. The other guards reacted instantly, and the fight erupted. Soraya limped forward, forcing herself to keep pace. She grabbed a fallen guard's rifle, its weight unfamiliar but manageable. She raised it and fired, the blast catching another soldier in the shoulder. The human took advantage of the opening, slamming his shield into the last defender and sending him sprawling. They reached the terminal together. The human began working the controls while Soraya covered him with the rifle. On the far side of the chamber, she saw movement. The Dominion was activating the release systems for the cages. A deep metallic groan filled the room as the first lock disengaged. The human's hands flew across the console. Warning lights flashed, alarms blared, and the energy shielding the core flickered dangerously. Finally, with a sharp command from the terminal, the locks on the cages froze, then sealed with a loud clang. The beasts roared in frustration but remained trapped. Soraya lowered the rifle, relief washing over her. The human turned from the console, retrieving his blade as more soldiers poured into the chamber. They had stopped the release, but the fight for the power core was far from finished. The chamber erupted into chaos as Dominion soldiers swarmed in from every entrance. The air was filled with the sound of shouting, the crackle of plasma fire, and the steady hum of the power core. The human tightened his grip on his shield and blade. Stepping forward to meet the charge, Soraya stayed close, firing the captured rifle in sharp bursts. Her aim was not perfect, but each shot forced the soldiers to hesitate. The human used those moments to close the distance, striking with swift, brutal precision. The floor shook under the weight of the battle. A soldier leapt from an upper walkway, landing between them. Soraya swung the butt of the rifle into his helmet, knocking him sideways. The human followed with a shield bash that sent the man sprawling over the railing. He hit the lower deck with a heavy thud and did not rise. More soldiers pressed in, trying to push them back from the terminal. The human planted his boots firmly, refusing to give ground. Every block and counterstrike was aimed to keep the enemy away from Soraya and the controls they had secured. His presence was an unbreakable wall in the storm. One of the Dominion officers shouted an order, and a heavy trooper stepped forward carrying an energy lance. The weapon glowed with lethal power, its tip sparking as the trooper advanced. Soraya's hands tightened on the rifle, but the human moved first. Meeting the trooper head-on, the clash sent a shockwave through the deck. Sparks flew as the lance scraped against the human's shield, each strike ringing out like a hammer on steel. The trooper was strong, but the human's footwork kept him just out of reach of the killing blows. Then, with a sudden twist, the human drove his blade into the trooper's side. The heavy soldier dropped to one knee, the energy lance clattering to the floor. The human kicked it away and finished him with a swift strike. Around them, the remaining Dominion fighters hesitated, their numbers thinning under the relentless defense. Soraya saw the shift in the battle and pressed forward. Together they pushed toward the main doors of the chamber. Each step was hard-fought, the path littered with fallen soldiers and broken weapons. The hum of the power core grew louder as alarms blared in warning. The Dominion had lost control of the heart of the station. A final group of soldiers made a desperate charge. The human met them in a blur of steel and motion, his shield absorbing the incoming fire while his blade found every gap in their armor. Soraya's rifle barked in short, sharp bursts, each shot driving the enemy back until none were left standing. Silence settled over the chamber once more. The only sounds were their breathing and the steady pulse of the power core. Soraya lowered her rifle, her hands trembling from both exhaustion and the weight of what they had just done. The human sheathed his blade and stepped toward her. "You saved more than just me," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held the truth of her gratitude. He had not only saved her life, but had stopped the Dominion from unleashing destruction on every soul aboard the station. He gave a small nod, as if the thanks were unnecessary. To him, it had been a choice made in the moment, without hesitation. He turned toward the terminal and began entering commands to secure the core from any further tampering. Soraya watched him, realizing how little she truly knew about him. With the last command entered, The power core's defenses locked into place. The Dominion's control was broken, and the station systems were returning to normal. Saraya felt the weight lift from her chest as the hum of the machinery shifted to a calmer rhythm. They left the chamber together, moving through the quiet corridors now free of enemy patrols. The destruction left behind told the story of their fight, but so did the silence that followed. Each step they took carried them closer to safety, though the memory of the battle would stay with them forever. When they reached the outer docking, Saraya turned to him. "Whatever paths we take from here, I will not forget what you did," she said. Her people would remember this day, and so would she. In that moment, she knew their fates had been bound by more than battle. The human had stepped between her and death, and in doing so, had changed the course of both their lives.